Welcome to the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube. This is our Awakening Together weekly gathering. Each and every week we have a different minister who speaks. If you'd like to attend our services live, please visit our website awakening-together.org. Click on Online Sanctuary on the main menu. Then, How to Enter the Sanctuary. Our services are held Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary.
All right. Good morning, beloveds. All right. Good morning. I was just, it's such a pleasure to be back here speaking to in the gathering this week. I've been away from speaking and whatnot, focusing on other things. And so it's a true pleasure and a blessing to be here with you all today. I was just sitting here tapping into this massive energy that's here. Whenever we all meet, it's a wonderful thing. So just tapping into everyone's energy. Again, hello to everyone. All right. So if you'll join me now for just a small prayer before we get started here with this week's gathering. I open up this prayer acknowledging the love, acknowledging the wholeness, acknowledging our connection, acknowledging that in this moment that there is nothing to seek after, to look for, to desire, to want. I acknowledge the presence of love. In this moment, I acknowledge my connection to this perfect love. I acknowledge the collective connection to this perfect love. I give thanks today for everybody, every individual body who has joined here, whether in person or whether by radio later or in some recording. However you connect in to this moment, this sharing, this teaching, I give thanks for your presence. For without your presence, we're incomplete. All is incomplete. So again, I acknowledge the presence of love, the energy of love, the consciousness of love here and now. And I ask that this love would guide the words, would move the energy in whatever way the energy and words need to be moved. I surrender my will, my way, for the way of love. And so it is, and so I let it be. Amen. All right, so I want to talk about a little bit about the book here today, how this book came into being and how it came into my hands. I actually have the book right here. It's called The Possibility Principle by Mel Schwartz. Mel Schwartz is a therapist. All right. He's a licensed marriage counselor and therapist. So the byline of this book is How Quantum Physics Can Improve the Way You Think, Live, and Love. So what I want to say is I listen to audiobooks often while I'm working. So this particular book, I really don't know how it came. I just pressed the button and I was listening to it. And so I was listening to the book and I went, ooh, wow, that is really powerful. I would never have, like when you say quantum physics, I immediately think scientific-y, way over my head and things like this. So I didn't expect at all to find any massive meaning in this book, right? So I'm listening to the book. I get through it, and chapter 5 in this book really blew me away because it's on thinking. But other aspects of this book also captured me in such a way I've even thought about doing a book review on this particular book, but I haven't settled in on that idea just yet. But I'm really moved by this book, and I'm also hoping to have the author come speak to us hopefully someday soon. Whenever we have availability in our sat songs. But there are 3 basic tenets that Mel Schwartz talks about in this book. 3 things: inseparability, uncertainty, and subjectivity. How those 3 things actually create that how quantum physics has connected our entangled state, right? And that to me was just, I mean, I've really, after I heard the book, the audio book, I actually ordered the book, right? So I'm now on my second tour through the book, actually physically in hand, reading it. The chapter that Rubye Nasser is going to come forth and read, or the excerpt from that chapter, is on mastering our thinking, right? There was a really major nugget that I was able to get out of this particular chapter that I'm going to share with you guys as we unpack it after she reads. But I want to set the reading up just a little bit to let you know that this section is about mastering your thinking, how he talks about, opens this chapter up talking about a groove in a record, how a groove gets stuck in a record and it just keeps replaying, and how our thoughts are similar to that, and that they're automatic in the fact that they just appear in our heads. So this chapter and the topic of this teaching today, this sharing today, is thought is the linchpin, right? Regina spoke recently about projection, and I believe this talk is a continuation of her sharing on projection. So I'm going to turn it over now to Rubye and ask her to come forward and read a section of The Possibility Principle by Mel Schwartz. Shifting from having thoughts to thinking is the section that she'll be reading from. And then I will be right back.
Okay, let's get started. This is The Possibility Principle by Mel Schwartz, and I downloaded the book on my Kindle, and and it seems very interesting. So, once you have developed your ability to notice your thoughts, you can begin to imagine an old thought as a visitor knocking at the door of your attention. You may hear the knock, but you can decide not to open the door. Our old thoughts come to us with tenacity. If you find a particular thought that won't stop knocking, try to follow a technique which many of my clients have found helpful. When you notice an old thought clamoring for your attention, place your forefinger vertically in front of your lips and shh to the thought. Remember that you can choose not to open the door. The thought will continue to try to draw your attention, so be persistent. As you progress in your ability to witness your thoughts, you can look at the recurring themes that they present. You'll likely notice a few central topics that your thoughts are drawn to. They may be numerous variations of this theme. The core belief that I always choose the wrong friends may include thoughts that range from, what's wrong with me? Why didn't I see that she was so selfish? Other people seem to have loyal people in their lives. Why don't I? These recurring themes tend to be limiting and often become self-fulfilling prophecies, as we've seen. They are often constellated around our confining wave collapses and limit our possibilities. It's essential that we notice how they attract our attention like a magnet. To break free of their pull and achieve a mastery of your thinking, you must first become aware of the tug of these thoughts. By tracking these thoughts back to their source, which is your fundamental belief about yourself. Once you progressed in your new ability to see your thoughts operating, you will notice a space between your thoughts. Within this space is an extra moment required for reflection. This space is where your possibilities reside. You can engage the state of superposition, which I've described in chapter 3. In the instance before you become your next thought, everything is possible. A primary tenet of the possibility principle is that this is the moment for us to become aware. Developing a heightened level of awareness regarding our thoughts permits us to be responsive rather than reactive. Between the instantaneous reaction of our thoughts lies a wiser and deeper sense of self, poised to emerge. The self notices its thoughts and ensuing feelings and isn't reduced simply to their end product. In the space between our last thought and our next thought, I emerge. And the I to which I am referring is wiser and deeper than my mere thoughts. I can choose to think differently, to see differently. This moment of awareness brings us to the precipice, where we can elect to become the master of our cognitive process and herald defining moments. These are new defining wave collapses in which we break free from the confines of earlier confining ones. We don't know what's to come, but we cultivate the space for new thinking to emerge. It bubbles up when we can get out of our way and allow our deeper intuitive wisdom to arise as we develop a relationship with our deeper being. It enables us to come out of our script, to break free from our stories and from our old wave collapses, trigger tired beliefs and thoughts. Literal thoughts versus participatory thinking. Remember, many of our recurring thoughts are the results of confining wave collapses when we are unaware of where they are coming from. We see them not as mere thoughts, but as truth. If you have carried a thought such as, I'm not good enough, or smart enough, or I'm a failure, or in the case of Jill, I'm not lovable, or Helen, I am not important, you don't see it as a thought. You blindly accept it as an objective truth. These confining thoughts form your primary beliefs and script your experience and life dramas. Not recognizing that our thoughts are falsely reported as truth to us, we accept the story that they are telling us. This is known as literal thought. Literal thought reports on the so-called truth that it is seeing and may sound like you are, or I am, or it is. This manner of thinking is completely at odds with the participatory paradigm. From the participatory paradigm worldview, our subjective thoughts and perceptions participate in our reality of making process. To understand the difference between literal and participatory thinking, let's go back to the example of Josephine. As I was encouraging her to break free of her old thought, she protested. This is not easy to do. Her thought asserted what appeared to be a truth. Her literal thought was stating as fact something that was actually a belief or perception. What I encouraged her to say instead was, I noticed that my thoughts were telling me this was going to be hard to do. Josephine then could distinguish what her thought was telling her. This rewording was far more simple semantics. It moved Josephine from feeling like a victim of circumstances towards being a creator of her experience. If we can separate from this cognition and notice what it's saying, we are more than purveyors of old thought. We are thinking. We are taking charge of our thinking process and inviting the possibilities of new thinking affords. The new thinking affords. As we've seen, this observation also slows down the automatic nature of our thought, allowing us to enter into a realm of thinking. Elite athletes often claim that when they're at the peak of their performance, in the zone, as they say, they seem to see the action in slow motion. This experience is what we should seek as we slow down the torrent of old thought processes. The higher state of awareness allows us to see and choose our thoughts and to develop a deeper and more grounded sense of ourselves that is more sovereign than the thought. It allows us to find the wiser and more genuine self that has been submerged beneath the clamor of our thoughts. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Rubye, for reading that. I do appreciate that very much. And you did a great job. All right. So again, we're going to unpack some of this reading. We're going to focus in on some of the particularly literal thought, and how that is literally creating our experience. And some of these, a couple of these tips in here that he gave us. But before I do that, I do want to acknowledge our core value that this reading or this sharing today is hopefully touching on or emphasizing in some way. And that is core value number 3. We accept one true self, which is one presence or being, non-dual, without beginning or end, and absolutely changeless. We live this value by practicing letting go of the belief in the individual self as who we are. Again, that is core value number 3. You can find our core values out on our website. All right. So let's talk about thought being the linchpin here. First of all, I want to talk about what a linchpin actually is. A linchpin is an old back in the Middle Western days or something term that means to, what a linchpin does is you put it on the wheel, or they used to put it on wheels that go round to stop the wheel from moving, right? That's the actual meaning of what a linchpin is. It's also talked about in the literary sense that as an essential piece or an essential part of something that's happening. Like you could say, like in a defense, a lawyer's defense case, the evidence was the linchpin of the case, right? The evidence was essential to winning that case. So a linchpin is an essential piece. And the reason why I've titled this talk, Thought is a Linchpin. Thought is a Linchpin is also a sentence in this book somewhere. I actually think it is in chapter 5. But when I read that sentence, something clicked in me, and I felt the click, and I knew that it was significant. It was one of these defining moments, all right, that Mel Schwartz is talking about in this chapter. So we've heard Regina give us this description in the past of having this thing that we're poking holes through, or this large screen that we're poking holes through, and that our goal is to poke enough holes in it so that we're able to see a bigger picture. And what I want to suggest today is that tapestry that we're poking the holes in is thought. On the other side of thought is pure love, right? If we can get beyond this literal thinking, believing our thoughts, as Regina talked about at her last sharing about projection, all right? Projecting what we have accepted as true. And her instructions to us last time was to work with that projection, to look at the fact, hey, this is projection. I even spoke up after she was done talking to share that I had recently had a similar experience where I knew that I was projecting my own beliefs, the stuff that was happening in the news. I knew that this is a form of projection, and that the thought was what was causing me to believe that. So when I went in to try to do what she suggested, which was to look at the projection without the projection, again, I recognized and realized that it's impossible to do that unless you're aware of your thought, unless you're able or willing to take these pauses that are mentioned here in this chapter and really understand what it is that you're thinking. So I want to go back here to literal thought that Mel pointed out, what literal thought is, right? he's talking about these beliefs that we hold, these core beliefs. I'm not good enough. We call that the I am bad thought here, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not smart enough. I'm a failure. In this book, he talks about how we have these experiences as children, and they create these wave collapses, is what the terminology that he uses here. They create these wave collapses. And a wave collapse could be something as small as a teacher not acknowledging that you got the question right, or it could be some chronic event that happened in your childhood that caused you to feel I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. You know, I've looked at these core values, or not core values, these core beliefs for myself, contemplated them, and, you know, come to the thing that understanding that one of my core beliefs is I'm not important, right? I'm not important enough. You know, I'm the oldest of 3 children. As an example here of how these wave collapses are formed, I'm the oldest of 3 children, and my brother and sister, we're stair steps, what we call them, stair steps. We were born 1 year apart. All right. So that means after I was barely 2 and my brother was born. So my mother's energy had to shift from taking solely care of me to focusing on my brother. So you can see where I'm going with this, right? Then another child comes along, and, you know, so I think for me, that feeling of not feeling like I mattered or that I was not important enough was definitely a core belief that may have been set up during that time. But I only share that example to show you how these wave collapses are set up. So once we have this core belief, once we've accepted that core belief, the tendency is to project that outward. To, in my case, in the example that I shared, where I had someone who was emailing and using language that I was viewing as somewhat aggressive and, you know, not professional, you know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, you know, the normal boundaries, right? People, you know, normally say things. I'm talking about things that are slightly outside of what you may consider normal, or what you would be really bothered by. And so in this example of projection, what I came to understand, and what this book, this chapter is pointing out about literal thought, is this whole thing about literal thought reports what is the so-called truth, right? So if I start a sentence out with you are or I am, if I start out that way, then I'm really reporting what I believe to be true at a very core and at a deep level is what I believe to be true. It's my core belief. So in order to break that up, in order to see that it's my beliefs that I'm projecting out, what this therapist is suggesting that we do, and I've practiced with this, and it's actually proven to be, as he mentioned here, more than semantics, more than just saying, just words that we're saying. It literally creates space. And what I'm referring to is where he's talking about this client that he had who was saying how difficult it was going to be for her to do what he was suggesting that she do. And he's asking her, which this also reminds me of Byron Katie's work. Is it true? Do I know it's true? All right. So what he suggested that she do was, instead of automatically going with that thought, oh, this is going to be so difficult for me, instead to say, I notice that I'm having a thought. I see that I'm having a thought that's telling me that I can't do this. This thought is telling me that she's being rude. This thought is telling me that I can't do any better than what I'm doing, or they can't do any better than what they're doing. You know, it's more than semantics, because it separates you from believing that thought. Making the statement of what you can't do or what someone else can't do, you know, that's a conclusion that you've drawn based on what you believe, you know? And I have been, as I mentioned, working with this particular practice of seeing that, okay, I'm having a thought that's telling me this, that, or the other. You know, that allows me not to run off with that thought, not to believe that thought, not to accept it as the truth, and not to project it out on someone else. So again, it's more than just the semantics of, oh, I see I'm having a thought. I see that, you know, this thought, and I don't do it with every thought. You know, I'm not walking around all day saying, oh, I'm having a thought that I'm hungry. Oh, I'm having a thought that I want to go lay down. Oh, I'm having a thought I like. You're not doing that, right? When this is the judgment, you know, when those types of judgmental thoughts come up, where I'm tempted to blame someone, or I'm tempted to be angry, right? That's another thing that's come, that I've come into a much clearer understanding about suffering, what suffering is, and how that, you know, we're all after this smooth sailing, this comfortable ride, right? We all want to not suffer, but the awakening for me, and I do love that our name is awakening, right? Awakening insinuates that it is an ongoing process, that we are continuing to evolve, continuing to monitor our thoughts, continuing to grow from out of core beliefs that have held us in very limited positions, right? As I continue to awaken, as I continue to experience these defining moments, and things have a deeper level of meaning. Let me give you an example of what I mean here. It's the statement, resist nothing, that's coming into my mind. When I initially came out on the spiritual path, which was many years ago, I can remember the term resist nothing, right? I can remember thinking, oh, that's really gonna get you somewhere if you can learn not to resist nothing, and really allow that to move you forward, and you'll live a more peaceful life. So I went through life at that time from that level of understanding, saying things like, I'm not going to resist this, and I'm not going to resist that. But all the time, the entire time, I was feeling that resistance, right? I was feeling the angst of that resistance. I've come to understand that that is a level of suffering. I've come to understand that it's more than just when I break my arm or I twist my ankle. Suffering involves emotional, psychological pain that we endure unnecessarily because we're believing thoughts that are dictating our next move. As Mel Schwartz mentioned in this reading, there's a space, he calls it a superposition, that exists between the thought that comes into our head and the way we go with that thought, where we go with that thought after it comes in, that there's this space. Bentinho has talked about this. I've heard other teachers talk about this, but you can't get to that space until you're at a point where you're seeing your thoughts and choosing not to believe them, right? And so this exercise that Mel gave us, I see that I'm having a thought that's telling me ... That exercise helps me to not just do what I was just talking about, making the statement, resist nothing, and running with that statement, resist nothing, thinking that I have it, I got it. All I need to do is resist nothing. No, but the emotions and because every thought has feelings attached to it. And that's another huge learning. Suffering and thoughts. Those are the two critical places that I've experienced deep defining moments, wave collapses, but in a positive sense, right? Understanding that, and I hope I'm making sense, because I know it's rushing out of my head, and I hope it's sticking where it needs to stick. In fact, I'm trusting that it's sticking where it needs to stick, that's going where it needs to go, and the energy is moving how it needs to move. Just trusting that. All right. So the resist nothing piece, I believed that that was accurate. All right. I believed that resist nothing was accurate. I felt that resonated with what I am. But at the same time, there weren't enough holes poked in the fabric of thought that was blocking the love, because as the Course in Miracles states, there's only one problem. There's one problem, and that is our belief in separation. And that's also why I really loved this particular book, because it talked about the quantum, the scientific proof, right? It's not just a belief, something that we're believing over here. Like, what did they used to call this spiritual, this fluffy stuff? We're not just fluffing it up to say that there's only one of us here, that there's only one awareness, only one consciousness. The quantum level has proven they've taken 2 photons of light. They took 2 photons of light, and they wanted to know how quickly, if one photon had a response, how quickly would the other photon respond, right? It's called the observer effect. All right. So what they discovered is the moment the first photon observed the other photon, they became entangled. The moment that they observed one, the moment the observer laid eyes on the observed, it came to life. They became entangled. Jada Smith made that entanglement word pretty popular back here lately with her and Will Smith. But entanglement is a real thing. And we are entangled at the quantum level, so there is this inseparability that if we choose the combination of dealing with our thoughts, looking at our thoughts, becoming aware of our thoughts, separating the belief, extracting the energy that we've placed into, that we've imbued into thought, right? Because wherever our spotlight goes, whatever we choose to focus our attention on, our energy goes right with that, right? We bring whatever we shine our spotlight on to life. Whatever we shine our spotlight on, we become entangled with. So there is no separation from you and I. There are individual bodies here, but there is one spirit penetrating everything, right? And that has been proven at a quantum level, at a scientific level. It's just not fully promoted out in the world the way some of the other things are. All right. So that is the ground. That is the basic foundation, right? That we start off with. We start with this principle of inseparability. We start with this truth of inseparability, right? And then from there, we look at our thoughts. Once I accept that I'm not, again, suffering and thoughts are the two. Thought is the linchpin, no doubt about it. Thought is the thing that is those blocks to love, right? That the Course in Miracle talks about. We want to remove the blocks to love's presence. And thought is the screen that's up there blocking us from seeing that only love is here. We're run off with these literal thoughts as, let me go back to what Mel Schwartz was saying here. We're unaware. Let me see. There's a section that he was talking about that he said, not recognizing that our thoughts are falsely reporting a truth to us, we accept the story they are telling us. This is known as literal thought. So we literally believe the thought that just entered our head. And we've had many speakers, many teachers come forth and say, and I know this is one of Regina's biggest soapboxes, all right? She's always telling us, thought, you have to, you have to see the thought for what it is. But again, understanding, going back to my resist nothing example, it wasn't until there are enough holes poked in that fabric that is that thin veil of nothingness that prevents us from connecting in fully to the power of love, you know, until we're willing to deal with that veil, until we're willing to look at that veil, see it for what it is, implement whatever processes and principles and exercises we can use to eliminate that belief, to discard those beliefs. That's when things like resist nothing mean everything. That's when you can look at resist nothing and go, okay, I know exactly what that means. And you can sit the side effect, the way you know, the way I know that I've gotten it, that I'm on the path that I'm seeking to, and correction there, no longer seeking. I want to be crystal clear that I'm no longer seeking anything. I'm acknowledging the presence of love. As I mentioned in my prayer earlier today, I'm more willing to acknowledge the presence of love. I'm more willing to accept that love is here now, available to me, available to you, available to everyone who will see it for what it is. I'm no longer searching and seeking for anything. I have found what I'm looking for, and I sit in that truth as often as I can think of, as often as I can. And I'm telling you that the side effect of that is joy. The side effect of that is peace. The side effect of that is the absence of suffering. And you know that because of how you feel. You know that. There's no shucking and jiving about what's going on here. You know that. And so, as I mentioned, thought is the linchpin. And what Mel is actually saying here, you know, he goes on. I stopped Rubye from reading the rest of that chapter, but I do want to share one other thing because it ties into what he's saying here. I noticed that thought. All right. So he gives us an example here. He gives us the example in this chapter. He is so selfish and cares only about himself. I mean nothing to him. All right. So there's literal thought in action. He's so selfish. Like he says, pay attention to thoughts or statements that are going, because the most important relationship that you'll ever have, and this is another thing that I've come to understand, I've come to recognize, and I've come to embrace, that the most important relationship that I'll ever have is the relationship I have with these conversation that's happening up here, right? The conversation that's happening up here is going to determine what comes out here and what comes from here. The conversation up here is the most important conversation there is to monitor, all right? So again, I go back. He is so selfish and cares only about himself. Now, what he suggests that we do is say, instead of that, say, I'm having a thought or a feeling that's telling me he's so uncaring and unselfish. Because if we were to truly do the work, as Byron Katie says, you know, we would break that down if we went into, is it true that he's selfish? We'd find other places where he hasn't been selfish. We'd find other places where he has been kind. We'd find other places where he's been gentlemanly. So it's not true that he's selfish. What's happening is we're believing our literal thought based on what our core beliefs are. That's what's happening. And until we see that thought and we're seeing it enough to now pause, and in that moment of retrospection, in that little tiny moment between that thought coming in and words spilling out of this mouth, I have a moment to reflect. I have a moment to see things differently. I have a moment to see things anew, to choose a new thought. So instead of me spilling that out, I say to myself, I'm having a thought that he's being selfish. I'm having a thought. I'm having a feeling that he's being mean at this moment, right? Now I'm the participant in what's happening. Now I'm in a place of power, a place where I can choose differently and I can do differently, right? And if not, then I go along with the thought. I believe it. I say he's so selfish. And then, an argument ensued. He stops talking or whatever else happens in the chaotic world of projection. We have the power to look at what's coming in our head and how we're interpreting that information. As Regina mentioned in her last sharing, we're projecting out, we're spewing out things into the world, knowing that we only have two ways that we can go. We're always going to go either fear or love. And I have made the conscious decision to learn from love. I'm at a place in this experience, in this evolutionary journey called life, where I am no longer so willing to learn from pain. Pain will always be your teacher if you're not willing to flip it around and see it for what it is and use it for the sake of love. Just as easily as I can learn from pain, I can learn from love. And so that's where I am. And so getting back here, what Mel goes on to say is that our role, your role in that thought is entirely removed in that first sentence. And that we don't have any participation in that first thought of he's so selfish and only cares about himself. The second statement reflects participatory thinking and takes note of what the thought is saying. If we don't notice what the thought is saying, it's just gone. It's gone. We've believed it. We've accepted it. There's nothing you can do about it. So the feelings that come after that thought, it's cause and effect. The feelings, or what is our other teaching? What I think about, I see. What I see, I experience. Is you just create this huge loop. Because you're believing and not taking the time, and so was I, still do, but I'm getting so much better at it. And just like he said in this reading as well, the more you practice with it, the less relentless those sticky, unyielding thoughts become, right? The more I say, I'm having that thought, I do see that thought, And I know that if I go along with that thought, I also have to go with whatever feelings come with it. If I think he's being an asshole and I believe it, then I'm going to suffer. Bottom line, that's as simple as it gets. I'm going to suffer because I'm going to be upset, and I'm going to project that upset out, right? And I'm going to create the reality that I'm living in. Which I do every day, which I do every moment, which you're doing every moment. You're creating the reality that you're experiencing based on the thoughts that you've chosen to believe and the perspective you've chosen to have about this whole life thing. So, this whole idea, like I said, of inseparability, that's the foundation, that's the start of it. That's where we can begin to loosen some of this. That belief has to be mixed in there also. But again, this whole idea of seeking and finding. In fact, I'm reminded now of, when I first, I knew that I was going to be talking about thought and projection and this type of thing. So when it came down time for me to locate my reading, I went for my old standbys, like Rupert Spira. I pulled out a trunk, that I have some books in, and I looked in there. I thought, okay, well, NTI is always a good standby. Rupert Spira is always, my favorite. And so I'm looking in the trunk, and nothing's really jumping out at me. No book is jumping out at me to work with for this reading. And so I sat back on my chair, and my eyes landed on this. The book I already had, right? the book that was already reading, was already receiving benefit from, and defining moments, having these defining moments about thought, and receive that the example that I shared with you. The eyes landed on what was already here. I didn't need to go to the trunk. I didn't need to go in there to look for a book to have my reading. I already have it. I already had it. And that's what I'm telling you today. You already have it. All right. So that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'm going to ask Dawn to play a closing song for you to contemplate. Also, if you are inclined to donate to Awakening Together, we are always happy to receive those donations, and they do make a huge difference. All right. For your kind words on the board. I love you all.
You've been watching our online gathering. It happens weekly on Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. To join us live in the sanctuary, visit our website, awakening-together.org. You'll want to click on Online Sanctuary in the main menu, and then in the drop-down menu, look for How to Enter the Sanctuary. Right there at the top of the page is a clickable link. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary and join with you in fellowship. Thank you again for watching. Also, please know that if you'd like to stay connected via the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube, you can subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. We hope to see you in the sanctuary.